Morning, my name is Nick. I'm the pastor here at Emmaus Church, and I want to say thank you for joining us for our virtual worship service. Maybe you're watching for the first time, you just stumbled upon us. Normally we meet over at the River Center, located inside of Saluda Shoals Park. We meet there every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. But we had some scheduling conflicts, so we are doing a virtual service today. If you'd like to introduce yourself to us, you can do that by filling out the Digital Connect card. Should be a link down in the chat. It's just your way of kind of letting us know you're ready for some information, and we will follow up and give you some suggestions on next steps for learning more about who we are and maybe even potentially getting plugged in. We got a couple of announcements I want to keep in front of you, things that we feel like are important. One, guys, we're going to be getting together next Thursday, March 28th, over at Stars and Strikes in Irmo at 6:30 p.m. We're going to do some bowling, get to know each other, kind of hang out. I've just been feeling this urgency to get something regular for the guys in our church that will lead to some other things. We've got some ideas about where this is headed, but for now, we just want to start hanging out. So I'd love for you to join us. Again, that's this coming Thursday, the 28th, over at Stars and Strikes, 6:30 p.m. If you wouldn't mind shooting me an email, nick@emmauschurchsc.com. Let me know you're coming. That way I can be sure to reserve enough lanes. And the next Sunday, y'all, is Easter. Easter, the Sunday of the year. And we got a really great service coming together. It's going to be outside. Weather's looking great so far, but we'll be in the lawn right next to the River Center. Same time, Sunday morning, 10 a.m. But this is a really good chance for you to invite friends and family. I read somewhere that like 8 out of 10 people said that they're open to coming to church as long as somebody they know invites them. So, do that. Let them know about us. I think there's a ton of people who are looking for a place like Emmaus Church. They they don't know it exists. That's where you come in, right? So just share it. In fact, go ahead and share this service on your own social media right now. We meet a lot of new people every time you do that. And then we've got some things floating around about Easter that you can share as well. And then one final announcement. This is more of a save the date. April 21st will be the Big Table. Those of you that are regulars, you know about the Big Table, but maybe you're new. Big Table is kind of like the state of the church dinner. We get together for a meal and we get to tell stories about things that have happened throughout the past year. We share kind of how we're doing financially, some of the ways in which those resources have been used. It's an important night. In fact, this is one of those nights that I really think, if Emmaus is your home, it needs to be prioritized, all right? So again, that is April 21st, 5 p.m. at the River Center. You can register for that, which we ask that you do on the website or the app, and there'll probably be a link down in the chat below. But again, April 21st. I don't know if you've had a chance or not to drive by the property, but y'all, things are happening, right? Things are happening. The slab got poured and it dried up, and now they've got the framing going up. Like all the steel framing is up. Be sure to drive by and check that out. I mean, it really is incredible to think about where we are, a little over 4 years into all of this. Our first home is going to be ready this summer, and that's nuts. That is all because of your faithfulness in giving and generosity. It is appreciated. It is needed. Emmaus wouldn't be here without it. So thank you in advance for continuing your faithfulness and being generous towards what God is doing here at Emmaus Church. Now, let's prepare ourselves to move into a time of worship.
Oh, I've searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures of faith are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you. Oh, yes, I know it's true. Oh, I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. Oh, there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, yes, I know. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, we feel you moving, Lord. Come on, every voice. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. Sing it again. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can turn my grace now. You turn grace into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing, nothing is better than you. Yes, I know, Lord. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing, nothing, nothing is better than you. Turn my praise, you turn praise into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. Lift up a mighty praise. You turn praise into gardens. You turn bones into armies. Yeah. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. He's the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Yeah, amen.
He rides into the holy city, entering its gates as king. Branches of palms laid at the feet, proclaiming victory, not over conquered people, not over claimed lands nor vanquished enemies, but ending the enmity between God and humanity. The evil of othering people for their differences, demonizing the sick and hurting, the diseased and damaged, the ones pushed to the margins by politics and religious power. but by bringing them back into the holy house, the temple made not by stones, but by the flesh and bones of the one who in his body absorbed the hatred, the sickness and sin, the diseases and despair, and gave back love and tenderness, wholeness and healing, compassion and commitment, whose domain is not borders and boundaries, countries and nations, not divides between us, but the expanse of our hearts, the rule of peace that comes when enfleshing the life of each other, seeing all as sisters and brothers, as neighbor and friend, not as different, but as ourselves in another, mirrored as a reflection, the divine spark between us, the Prince of Peace who enters our hearts into the depths of our souls, the holiest of holies, seeing who we are, knowing every part of our being, the beneath the charade and disguises we sometimes make for ourselves, often two-faced and false, loyalties swaying, branches in the wind, being unraveled so what is beneath could come to the surface, to face the light and love, to see ourselves as we truly are, allied with the one who saw himself rejected and despised, disposable, but remade and rebuilt into a holy house, a sacred temple, body renewed, restored as the cornerstone, the foundation of God's hesed, God's tenacious and everlasting love, extreme love that endures forever.
Two, three, four. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, I worship you. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you, yeah, I worship you. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Oh, that is who you are. 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 Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop, you never stop working. You never stop, you never stop. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. 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 Oh, that is who you are. 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 Oh, no matter what we face, Jesus, that is who you are. Even when we don't believe, even when we can't feel you, Jesus, that is who you are. Through the broken relationships, Jesus, through the sickness, Lord, poor or rich, poor or rich, Jesus, you're there through the thick of it, Lord. You're there in the midst of it, Lord. Oh, you are light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. 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 Oh, that is who you are. 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 That is who you are.
Scripture reading today comes from Luke chapter 17, verse 7. Jesus says, "Suppose one of you has a servant plowing or looking after the sheep. Will he say to that servant when he comes in from the field, 'Come along now and sit down to eat'? Won't he rather say, 'Prepare my supper, get yourself ready, and wait on me while I eat and drink? After that, you may eat and drink'? Will he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? So you also, when you have done everything you were told to do, should say, 'We are unworthy servants. We have only done our duty.'" Now may God add a blessing to the reading, hearing, and understanding of the scriptures. We'll show you all a picture starting off. Y'all know who this is, right? The saint we know as Mother Teresa. You know, that's not actually her real name. Her real name is Agnes. And Agnes was born in Macedonia. She came from a really wealthy family. But after her father died when she was 8, it upended her family's financial security. And when she was 18, she left home and she went to a convent in Ireland. That was the last time that she saw her mother or her sisters again. It was another 20 years before she was living in the slums of Calcutta, working with the poorest of the poor. It seems that was like the only thing that she could imagine doing with her life, and she was really good at it. She did it for the next 60 years, and in the process, she started the most successful order in the history of the Catholic Church. Mother Teresa, she won a lot of awards along the way, most famously the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979. But let me tell you how much of a gangster she was. When she found out that the banquet for the Nobel Prize was going to cost $192,000, she said, "Don't host a banquet." She's like, "Give that money to the poor." But when she was at the award ceremony, she was asked, what should we do to promote world peace? And she famously said, "Go home and love your family." I mean, she's a gangster. People who were close to her said that she loved to laugh. And you could often find her in the evenings doubled over, laughing about what had happened during the day. And they said she had this small, mischievous smile that looked like she was in on an inappropriate joke. Apparently, she had a big sweet tooth. She loved ice cream and especially chocolate. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for Agnes. What has come to light since her death is that she often battled what she called a darkness. In letters to her spiritual director, she was really candid about what felt like God's absence, or at least God's silence. It's so fascinating. I even think it's refreshing to know that all of this like lived inside of this tiny woman. And I think it also brings even more meaning to the famous words that were found on a wall in her home for children in Calcutta. Now, some say the words were actually written on her bedroom wall, but they've come to be known as the Anyway poem. Listen to these words. It says, people are often unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some false friends and some true enemies. Succeed anyway. If you are honest and frank, people may cheat you. Be honest and frank anyway. What you spend years building, someone could destroy overnight. Build anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, they may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today, people will often forget tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give the world the best you've got anyway. You see, in the final analysis, it is between you and your God. It was never between you and them anyway. Truth is, Mother Teresa didn't even write those words. They're commonly attributed to her, but she didn't write them. This poem is a slightly altered version of something that was originally known as the Paradoxical Commandments, written by Kent Keith in 1968 when he was a 19-year-old sophomore at Harvard. Kent Keith wrote them as a part of a book for student leaders that was called The Silent Revolution. Funny thing is, Kent didn't even find out about all this until 1997, the year Mother Teresa died. He was at a Rotary Club meeting, and the meetings often began with somebody reading a poem or sharing a few thoughts to start their time together. And a friend of his noted that Mother Teresa had died, and in honor of her memory, he wanted to read a poem that she had written titled Anyway. Kent said he bowed his head and he closed his eyes so he could listen to the words. And he was shocked when he heard his friend read his own words that he had written nearly 30 years earlier, being read as a poem written by the one and only Mother Teresa. Like, imagine trying to convince people of that. You know, I actually wrote that. You know, Mother Teresa never claimed to be the author. The words somehow found her all those years ago, and she put them on her wall. And people saw the words after she died and assumed that she wrote them. It seems like Keith needs to add another line to the poem, right? Other people will get credit for your ideas. Share them anyway. But I love what he said when all of this went down. He said, Mother Teresa thought that the paradoxical commandments were important enough to put up on the wall of her children's home. That really hit me. I wanted to laugh and cry and shout, and I was getting chills up and down my spine. Perhaps it hit me hard because I had a lot of respect for Mother Teresa, and perhaps because I knew something about children's homes. Whatever the reason, it had a huge impact on me. It's like not getting credit for the writing didn't seem to matter too much to him. He was just overwhelmed by the fact that his words were a part of inspiring and encouraging an incredible person to stay the course, to stay at it. I mean, knowing that meant way more to him than any sort of recognition would mean. I share all this because it gets to the heart of what I want to talk about this morning. Right, we're spending our time together leading up to Easter talking about the cross. You know, the cross is easily one of the most recognized symbols in the world. It is the center point of our faith, but that doesn't mean that it's, easily understood. Most people only understand the cross as that thing Jesus did to get us off the hook with God. But the picture the scriptures paint of what the cross is and what the cross means, it's way bigger. It's more beautiful and it's more challenging than that. I mean, Jesus' death on the cross certainly was a historical moment, but what happened on the cross was a revealing of something that's always been true, that the God behind all of this is cross-shaped. Remember, in 1 Corinthians, it says that Christ crucified is the wisdom and the power of God. Or in 1 John, we're told that God is love. And then it goes on to explain that this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. Bottom line, Jesus sacrificially laying down his life on the cross is the clearest picture we have of what the God behind all of this looks like. And this, of course, has all sorts of implications. We were challenged last week to spend some time prayerfully considering, like what does this mean? What are all of the things that flow out of this truth? Like, if this is true, then what else is true? I mean, there's all sorts of things to think about. The reality is that the real meaning of the cross, man, it's infinite. Like, it always has something to say. It has always some way of challenging us and comforting us. You won't exhaust all of the meanings of the cross. And in that regard, what really seems to matter isn't do we fully understand the cross, but are we being formed by it? And that's what I want to get into today, is to really wrestle with this idea of the cross as not just an event, but as a way of life. That's what we're going to get into today. Quick prayer, and then we'll go for it. God, we just thank you again for this time together. No matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, if we come together and we turn our hearts and our minds towards you, and we submit ourselves to what you want to say to us through your scriptures, things can happen. So speak to us now. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So I want to get into this fascinating teaching in Luke chapter 17. But first, kind of want to set it up a bit, right? This passage is part of a larger portion of Luke's gospel. It's often referred to as the journey narrative. And it runs from chapters 9 through all the way to chapter 19. And it follows Jesus' final trip to Jerusalem, and more specifically, his journey to the cross. There's something interesting, though, going on with this part of the gospel, because at least 8 times throughout the journey narrative, the author tells us that Jesus was headed to Jerusalem, to the cross. Like 8 times. It keeps showing up. It's like he wants us to keep this in mind, that everything we read and everything that happens in this part of the gospel is meant to be understood in light of the fact that Jesus was headed to Jerusalem. He was headed to the cross. But if you were to track Jesus' movement like on a map, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. Like when it first opens in chapter 9, Jesus is in Galilee and Samaria, which is it's like up here. It's in the northern part of the country. But then in chapter 10, Jesus is suddenly down here in Bethany, which is like right next to Jerusalem. So he's like right there. But then in chapter 13, he's back up in Galilee again. So like if you were to chart it on a map, his travel, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So either Jesus has a bad sense of direction or there's something else going on here. You see, the gospel writers were less concerned with sharing with us Jesus' itinerary, and they more wanted to help us understand his identity, right? This was a common practice in ancient literature, especially with biographies. But what biographers would do is they would take the events of a famous person's life and sort of rearrange them in a way to communicate something to us about them, right? That's what the gospel readers are doing. Like if you read through the gospels carefully, you'll notice that they share a lot of the same content, like especially Matthew, Mark, and Luke. These are the synoptic gospels. They share a lot of the same content, but they don't share a lot of the same order. They kind of rearrange it differently. And that's because each of them are trying to share something unique with us. They're focusing on something specific about who Jesus is and what Jesus is up to. And so what many scholars suggest is that Luke has taken some of the teachings and life events of Jesus and placed them within this journey towards the cross, towards Jerusalem. Not necessarily to tell us about Jesus' journey to the cross, but to help us understand our own journey to the cross. I mean, the whole section even begins with Jesus telling us, hey, if you're gonna follow me, if you're gonna be one of my disciples, one of my apprentices, you're going to have to take up your cross too. You see, for us as followers of Jesus, the cross isn't just an event. It's meant to be the pattern of our life. It isn't just, the means by which we were made right with God. It's also meant to be the model around which we live our lives. So that's the context for this teaching in Luke chapter 17. I'm going to read it one more time just to make sure that it's in the front of our minds. Luke chapter 17, verse 7, Jesus says, "Suppose one of you has a servant plowing or looking after the sheep. Will he say to the servant when he comes in from the field, 'Come along now and sit down to eat'? Won't he rather say, 'Prepare my supper, get yourself ready, and wait on me while I eat and drink. After that, you may eat and drink'? Will he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? So you also, when you have done everything you were told to do, should say, 'We are unworthy servants. We have only done our duty. Remember, this is saying something to us about a life lived along the pattern of the cross. Now, it might be a little hard for us to relate to this teaching because we're not that familiar with a world that has a lot of servants. There's a lot less servants now than there used to be. But in the first century, it was a really common thing. People were servants for all sorts of reasons. And there were different types of servitude. Some were born into it. Some chose to enter into it in order to work themselves out of poverty. It was a very common thing. And so Jesus is taking something that they would have been familiar with, and he's using it to talk about their life with God. Essentially what he's doing is he's reminding them, like, listen, it's a servant's duty to do what the master says. It's not something remarkable when a servant does a servant's job. A servant wouldn't come in after doing what they were expected to do and then expect a reward for it. No, just be like, I'm just a servant. I'm just doing my duty. And so in the same way, when you have done your duty, when you have done the right thing, when you've done the cross-shaped thing, the hard thing, the selfless thing, deal out of it. Certainly, don't make the mistake of thinking that God now owes you. See, that's not how this works. When you do the right thing, the good thing, the cross-shaped thing, you're just a servant who's doing their duty. You see, I think what Jesus is doing here, in many ways, is he's rooting out the soul-shrinking disease that is entitlement. Entitlement. Entitlement is that sense that we're owed, that the world, the people in our lives, the universe itself is somehow in our debt. It owes us. You know, and entitlement, it creeps in all sorts of ways. But I've noticed two. I've noticed two big ones as it relates to like living a cross-shaped life. Like entitlement often attaches itself to either obedience or hardship. Those are the two places that you normally kind of see it sort of attach itself. Like people who do the right thing, the hard thing, the generous thing, like they help out that person, right? Or they offer forgiveness even when it was really difficult, when it wasn't deserved. They show up, you know, for that person at that time. They do the right thing. They don't just do it, but they sort of keep track of it, right? They write it down, so to speak. They keep record of it. It's almost like they sort of have this scale, you know, and on one side, it's all the things that they've done. They feel like they've done, they've accomplished, and there's stuff that needs to happen in order for that scale to get balanced. They need some good to sort of come their way. You know, for some of us, it's like there's this list that we carry, and we keep adding to it, you know, the list of all the things that we've done, all the reasons we're owed. You know, like we were the good sibling. We were the good kid. You know, we changed this many diapers. We were willing to move for their career, right? We took care of our in-law before they passed away. Like we have this list of these things that we've done, and that we, not only did we do them, but it's like we feel like we're owed now for it. Making these lists. You know, but entitlement can also attach itself to like hardship, to struggle, to tragedy. You know, it's like people who experience some sort of loss or difficulty. If you're not careful, you can kind of live with this sense that you feel like God owes you now for that. Which makes me wonder, you know, if God is supposed to, you know, if God owes us for all of the bad things that have happened in our life that he didn't stop or prevent, does that mean that we owe God for all the good things that have happened that we took for granted? You see, it just, I don't know. I think one of the things that Jesus is telling us, he's just sort of warning us, like watch out, be careful, because entitlement will rob you of your joy. It'll just smother it out. Because what entitlement does is it gets us to focus all of our attention on what we don't have, or what hasn't happened, what hasn't gone our way. And when entitlement has our attention, it makes sure that's all that we see. You know, self-pity can be really addicting. When we start feeling sorry for ourselves, we become this sort of perpetual victim that is blind. It's not even capable of seeing the good things that are happening in our lives, or the good things that have happened to our lives. I'm telling you, entitlement, if we're not careful, it will rob you of your joy. And you know, in the grand scheme of things, our lists, they just look really silly. Like, in fact, you know, indulge me for a minute. Let's use our imagination. Let's have a little bit of fun, right? Let's say somehow you have been given the cosmic opportunity to meet with God and to present God with your list of all the reasons why you think you deserve some more good. You guys have worked out some arrangement, right? Like where you're going to share his list and then God's going to get a chance to share God's list, right? So this sort of scenario has happened. And you show up, you show up to God's office or whatever, and God's got a nice office. And, when you get there, God's really excited to see you. He's got this big smile on his face. And that kind of, warms you up a little bit, kind of loosens you up. And you think, well, here I am, I'm on God's turf, and I am a humble person. I mean, it's on my list. So God, I'll tell you what, you can go first with your list. And God's like, you sure about that? Really? Thank you. I'll do that, And so God just kind of starts with the small stuff, right? He's just sort of like messing with you a little bit. He's like, let's see, oceans, mountains, rivers, streams, the sun. My idea. I did that, right? And you're like, oh man, this isn't looking good already. Stars, the beach, trees, pasta, oxygen, that breath that you just took, holding hands with somebody for the first time. Isn't that great? Yeah, that was me. That was my idea. The way sunshine can feel on your face after it's been cloudy for a while. Sneezing, isn't that great? That was me. That was my idea. Like the sound of rain on a metal roof. Isn't that awesome? The smell of like fresh baked bread. Watching a child walk for the first time. Yeah, I thought about that first. Will Ferrell, my idea. Jumping into the lake on a hot summer day. Music, I knew you'd like that one. Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Jay-Z, right? Art, you like art? Yeah, I thought y'all would love art. Picasso, Monet, Van Gogh, Bob Ross. Gravity, laughing, falling in love, the cool side of the pillow, rubbing your feet into the carpet after you've been wearing shoes all day. Salsa, cilantro. Come on, give it up for cilantro. Cilantro alone is a reason not to get into like the list making game with God. Am I right? So God pauses, he kind of catches himself. He's like, okay, you know what? I could go on forever, literally. Like, I'm talking too much. Why don't you take a turn? You do one now. You share part of your list. You're just like in the face of all of that. Like, I gave like $100 to my church. It's like, you don't want to get into the list making game with God. You don't. There's no joy there. And I think that's what Jesus is trying to get us to see, is that in the grand scheme of things, our lists look really silly. Man, entitlement will rob you of your joy. See, a servant does what a servant is supposed to do, because that's just a servant doing what a servant is supposed to do. I think Jesus, I think one of the things that Jesus is trying to get to us in this teaching is trying to drive home the point that like the reward for doing the right thing is doing the right thing. Like that is the reward. The reward is becoming the kind of person who for doing the right thing is becoming a more normal thing, the more natural thing. Like that's what's offered to us in terms of our faith in the gospel is a change in character, to become the kind of people for whom the most generous thing, the most cross-shaped thing, the right thing isn't this hard, awkward, or unfamiliar thing. It's becoming more and more of the natural thing, the normal thing. Wouldn't that be something? If we could become those kind of people, where it wasn't so much of an effort. It just was what it was. This is what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And we just have this habit of slapping conditions, all over the place. It's like, I'll treat them this way as long as they reciprocate. Or I'll keep doing the right thing as long as I know it'll turn out like this. Or I'll keep doing the hard thing as long as it doesn't cost me too much. Like as long as it's not too, risky, right? I'll do it. And so when, they don't respond the way that we want them to, when we don't get what we wanted, or it takes longer than we expected, or it's scary or hard, or it's going to cost us something, we quit, we bail, we don't follow through. I think this is one of the reasons why so many of us struggle to experience any sort of real change or growth, like in our own lives individually. But maybe more importantly, I think it's one of the reasons why we don't experience more change or transformation in the world around us. It's because our commitment to the cross-shaped way of life is just way too conditional. And we're looking for the reward in the wrong place. We haven't made our commitment to Jesus or to the cross-shaped way of life simply for the benefit of living life that way. Now, I've been reading this book during Lent. It's called The Wood Between the Worlds by Brian Zahnd, and it's all about the cross. It's some beautiful reflections on some of the different things that the cross means, and it's a beautiful book. I highly recommend it, but I was really moved by his reflection on the life of a man named Franz Jagerstatter. It's quite the name, right? He wasn't from like Red Bank. Franz Jagerstatter was an Austrian farmer in a small mountain village on the German-Austrian border at the start of World War II. He was a somewhat wild youth, and he was known for getting into a good bit of trouble, but in his late 20s, he had an encounter with the Spirit of Jesus that radically changed his life. And from that time on, he was a devout follower of Jesus. And this commitment led him to reject the growing popularity of Nazism among his fellow Austrians. He was quite outspoken about the danger that he saw in this new movement, and eventually he was ostracized by his fellow neighbors for not being patriotic enough. Then when Austria was annexed into Germany in 1938, Austrians who were drafted into the military had to swear an oath of allegiance to Hitler. And Franz was the only one in his village to refuse, and as a result, he was arrested. And during his 5 months of imprisonment, he was repeatedly offered release if he would just sign the oath. But each time, he refused. And on August 9th, 1943, Franz Jagerstatter was executed by the guillotine at the age of 36 years old. His last words were, "I am completely bound in inner union with the Lord. I'm just a servant doing my duty." And his martyrdom didn't get the public attention like that of public figures like Dietrich Bonhoeffer. No one really knew about Franz outside of his village. But in 1964, Gordon Zahnd published a biography about him called Solitary Witness. And it finally told his story to the wider world. And it captivated the Christian community. In 1997, the German government symbolically reversed his death sentence. And in 2007, he was beatified by Pope Benedict, placing him on the path to sainthood. His wife and his daughters were there for the ceremony. And then in 2019, the acclaimed filmmaker and Christian, Terrence Malick, released a movie about Franz called A Hidden Life that used his story to challenge followers of Jesus to do just that, follow Jesus. There's a scene in the movie that sort of haunts me a bit. It's where Franz visits a church where his friend Ollendorf has been painting frescoes of the life of Jesus. And for some reason, he avoids the suffering of Jesus. He only paints the positive things. Listen to what he says. He says, "I paint all of this, but I don't suffer myself. I made a living of it. What we do is just create admirers. We don't create followers. Christ's life is a demand. We don't want to be reminded of it. I paint the comfortable Christ with the halo over his head. How can I show what I haven't lived? Someday I might have the courage to venture, but not yet." Again, I learned about Franz from Brian Zahn's book. And in this book, he says this. He says, "The difference between admirers and followers of Christ is essentially the plot line so deftly portrayed in A Hidden Life. The devout church-attending villagers were admirers of Christ. Franz Jagerstatter was a follower of Christ. The admirers avoided contact with danger, seeming entirely reasonable for doing so. The lone follower was obedient to Christ despite the danger, and he seems either a fool or a saint, depending on your point of view." So one of the reasons why I love this so much is because when Franz made this stand, it didn't get any sort of attention. There was no social media posting about it. There was no fanfare. There was no recognition at all. He died an unknown martyr to most of the church. But now, decades later, thousands of people are being challenged and inspired by his quiet and profound witness. See, I think this is how we change the world. This is how it happens. We don't change the world by actually trying to change the world. We Change the world by being the part of the world that's already been changed by Jesus. That's how things change. We commit to doing the right thing, the cross-shaped thing, not for what it might give us in return, but because it's the right thing to do. It's the Jesus thing to do. It's the cross-shaped thing to do. See, the world as it is slowly changes and transforms into the world as it should be by the quiet and consistent obedience of followers, people who commit to a cross-shaped way of life. So that's my word for us. That's it. I mean, in a world full of admirers of Jesus, let's actually be followers of Jesus, especially when it's hard. Amen. So I'm going to finish just by reading those words to us one more time, the Anyway poem. And let's just make it a sort of prayer for ourselves that we would commit to this wholeheartedly. People are often unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some false friends and some true enemies. Succeed anyway. If you are honest and frank, people may cheat you. Be honest and frank anyway. What you spend years building, someone could destroy overnight. Build anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, they may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today, people will often forget tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give the world the best you've got anyway. Because you see, in the final analysis, it is between you and your God. It was never between you and them anyway. Amen.